The courtroom doors opened behind me, and I heard the whole gallery inhale at once. I didn't turn around. I didn't have to. I could tell from the sound. The sudden hush. The shift of 40 heads all moving in the same direction. Exactly what my husband wanted me to see. David walked down the center aisle of that courtroom slowly, deliberately, the way a man walks when he's rehearsed it. And on his arm, dressed in soft pale blue, one hand resting on the gentle curve of her belly, was Brooke. 7 months pregnant, his mistress, brought to our divorce hearing like a trophy he wanted the judge to admire. He walked her right past my table, close enough that I caught her perfume, close enough that he could lean down, just slightly, and murmur, not to her, to me. "You're going to walk out of here with nothing, Nora. You always were nothing." The gallery couldn't hear it. Only I did. That was the point. That was always the point with David. The cruelty delivered quietly, so that to everyone else, he looked like a gentleman, and only I ever felt the blade. I looked up at him, and I smiled. Not because I was brave, not because I wasn't scared. I was terrified. My hands were cold. My 6-year-old daughter's whole future was about to be decided in that room. I smiled because of a thin manila envelope sitting on my attorney's table, sealed, that David didn't know existed. He thought he'd walked in there to bury me. He had no idea what he'd walked in there carrying. Let me take you back. My name is Nora. For 8 years it was Nora Bennett. Before that, and again now, thank God, it was Nora Callahan, and I was raised by a grandmother who worked 40 years as a court stenographer in a county building not so different from the one I'd end up fighting for my daughter in. My grandmother had a rule she gave me when I was maybe 9 years old, sitting at her kitchen table while she shelled peas. I'd come home crying because a girl at school had humiliated me in front of everyone, and I'd screamed at her, and I'd gotten in trouble while the other girl walked away clean. My grandmother didn't comfort me the way I wanted. She just looked at me and said, "Baby girl, listen to me, and don't forget it. Don't ever fight loud. Loud is for people who are losing. When it really matters, you fight quiet, and you fight with paper." I didn't understand it then. I was 9. But I would spend the worst year of my adult life learning exactly what she meant. Because when I married David Bennett at 26, I did it loud and joyful and certain. And when it all came apart 8 years later, the only thing that saved me, the only thing that saved my daughter, was that somewhere along the way, I remembered how to be quiet. David was charming. They always are, aren't they? In the stories people send in the comments under these videos, it's always the same. He was so charming at first. And it's true, and it's a trap, because charm is just control that hasn't shown its teeth yet. The teeth came slowly. First it was money. David decided, about a year into our marriage, that he'd handle the finances. Better with numbers, he said, and I believed him. Within 2 years, I didn't have access to a single account in my own name. I got a household allowance. I had to ask, do you know what it does to a grown woman to have to ask her husband for money to buy her own daughter shoes? It's not about the shoes. It's about the asking. The asking is the whole design. Then it was people. My friends were a bad influence. My sister was toxic. One by one, David found a reason I shouldn't see each person who might have looked at my life from the outside and said, "Nora, something is wrong here." By year 5 it was mostly just us. Him, me, and our daughter Emma, the one bright, unbreakable good thing in all of it. And then it was my mind. "You're overreacting. That never happened. You're remembering it wrong, Nora. You know how you get." A man can rearrange your entire sense of reality, one small correction at a time, until you genuinely don't trust your own memory of a conversation you had that morning. By the time I found out about Brooke, I had been made so small, so unsure of myself, that my first thought wasn't rage. My first thought was, maybe I imagined it. I hadn't imagined it. I found out the way people always seem to: a phone left face up, a message preview, A name with a heart. Brooke. 6 months of dinners David had told me were client meetings. A whole second life, running parallel to mine, in the same hours I'd been home putting our daughter to bed and reheating a plate for a husband who was with someone else. I want to tell you I confronted him. I want to tell you I threw the phone, screamed the house down, made him feel 1 ounce of what detonated in my chest that night. I didn't. I stood in our dark kitchen at 11 p.m. holding his phone, and I heard my grandmother's voice. 40 years of watching people lose their cases by losing their tempers on the stand. Don't fight loud. Fight quiet. Fight with paper. So I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it, face up, at the exact angle. I went to bed beside him, and the next morning I made his coffee and kissed him goodbye and started, very quietly, to build a file. Not because I'm cold, because I finally understood that a man like David doesn't lose a fair fight. He only loses when you stop fighting the fight he wants and start fighting the one he doesn't see coming. Here's what David decided to do, and it tells you everything about him. He filed first. He got to the courthouse before I did, with an expensive attorney and a story already built. In his version, I was the unstable one. I was the erratic wife, the one who couldn't be trusted with the child, the one who had no income, no assets, no stability. He requested primary custody of Emma. He requested the house. He requested that I walk away, as he put it to my face one night, when he finally dropped the pretense, with what you came in with, which was nothing. That was his favorite word for me. Nothing. He said it so many times over those months that I think he genuinely believed it. You're nothing without me, Nora. You'll get nothing. You are nothing. He was so busy telling me I was nothing that it never once occurred to him to wonder what I was doing, all those quiet evenings while he was out with Brooke. I'll tell you what I was doing. I was fighting with paper. It started with a single USB drive. For 8 years, David had handled the finances. He thought that meant I didn't understand them. What it actually meant was that for 8 years, every financial document in that house had passed across a desk in a home office that I cleaned every single week. I knew where the statements were. I knew the login he used for everything, because it was the same one he used for everything. Because men who think they're the smartest person in every room are often astonishingly lazy about the details. Over 4 months, quietly, a little at a time, I copied everything onto one small USB drive that lived taped to the underside of a drawer in my daughter's room. The one place I knew David would never look, because he'd never once, in 6 years, changed one of Emma's diapers, let alone opened her dresser. And what I found on those statements made my hands shake. David wasn't just hiding an affair, he was hiding money, a lot of it. There was a business account, Bennett Consulting, an LLC I'd never heard of, that had, over 3 years, quietly swallowed nearly $400,000 of what should have been marital income. Money he'd told me we didn't have when I asked about Emma's school. Money he was, I would later learn, planning to walk away with while I got nothing. On his official financial disclosure to the court, the sworn one, the one with penalties for lying, that account did not exist. My grandmother's voice again, dry as a bone. Baby girl, that's not a divorce anymore. That's perjury. And judges don't forgive a man for lying to their face. I took the USB drive to a lawyer. Not David's kind of lawyer. A quiet, sharp, unshowy woman named Diane Okafor, who read through everything twice without saying a word, then took off her glasses and looked at me and said, "Nora, you've been very, very patient. Let's not waste it. Say nothing to him. Let him keep talking. Men like this always talk themselves off a cliff. We just have to make sure a court reporter is there when he does. Fight quiet. Fight with paper. I won't pretend that year didn't cost me something. Living in a house with a man while quietly building the case that would end him, smiling at him, making his coffee, saying goodnight, is a special kind of exhausting that I hope you never have to know. Some nights I'd lie awake beside him listening to him sleep so peacefully, so certain, and I'd feel like I was disappearing, like the quiet was swallowing me. The thing that kept me whole was Emma. Every evening, after David went out to his client dinners, I'd sit on the floor of my daughter's room and read to her, and she'd fall asleep against my shoulder, and I'd think, I am not doing this to win. I am doing this so she never learns from watching me that a woman is supposed to shrink. That's what got me through. Not revenge. Her. The idea that one day she'd be old enough to understand that when it mattered most, her mother didn't fall apart and didn't blow up. She stood very still, and she was very smart, and she got them both out. There was one more thing, and this is the part I didn't engineer. The part that just came to me. The way the truth does, when a man has told too many lies to keep them all straight. In the discovery process, the part of a divorce where each side has to hand over documents, Diane subpoenaed the full records of that hidden Bennett consulting account. Every transaction, 3 years of it. And buried in there, dated 4 months earlier, was a payment. $1,100. To a private medical lab. Diane found it first. She called me on a Tuesday and asked, in a very careful voice, whether I knew what David might have been paying a prenatal genetics lab for. I didn't, but I could guess. And when Diane pulled the itemized record, which the lab was legally required to provide once subpoenaed, we both sat on that phone call in total silence for a long moment. David had ordered a private prenatal paternity test on Brooke's baby, the baby he was, at that very moment, parading around town as his son, his heir, the real family he was leaving me for, the baby he'd mocked me over. I finally get a son, Nora, not just a daughter. He'd tested it, secretly, because some paranoid, controlling part of him had to be sure. And the result had come back. Diane slid the sealed lab report into a plain manila envelope. "We don't open this in front of him," she said. "We don't threaten him with it. We don't give him a chance to prepare a face for it. We let him walk in there certain he's won, and then we let the judge open it. Fight quiet, fight with paper, and never, ever, waste a good ending on a small room." There was one more test of my patience before the courtroom, and it nearly broke me. 2 weeks before the hearing, David's attorney requested a settlement meeting. A last chance to resolve this amicably, they said. Diane warned me what it really was. "This isn't an offer, Nora. This is theater. He wants to see you desperate. He wants you to take a bad deal so he never has to open his books. Whatever he says in that room, you say nothing. You let me talk. Can you do that?" I could. Barely. We sat across a long conference table, David in a suit that cost more than my monthly allowance had been, Brooke conspicuously not there this time. He was smart enough to keep her out of a room with lawyers. He slid a single sheet of paper across the table with 2 fingers, the way you'd return something you found distasteful. An offer. He would generously allow me to keep my personal belongings. He would pay me $500 a month for 1 year. Transitional support, he called it, like I was an employee being let go. In exchange, I would sign over the house, waive any claim to his income, and agree to joint custody with him as the primary residential parent. $500 a month. For the woman who'd raised his daughter, cleaned his house, and typed his emails for 8 years. He watched my face the whole time I read it. That was the part he wanted. My face. He wanted to see the moment I understood how little he thought I was worth. And I felt the old heat climb up my neck. Felt 8 years of ask me for money. Nora and you're overreacting. Nora and you're nothing. Nora all rise up at once. And every cell in my body wanted to stand up and scream the truth across that table. "I know about the account, David. I know about the 400,000. I know about the lab." I didn't. I heard my grandmother shelling peas. Loud is for people who are losing. I set the paper down. I folded my hands, and I let Diane say, in the flattest, most pleasant voice imaginable, "We'll see you in court." David's smile flickered. just for a second. Because for a second, he'd expected tears, or fury, or begging, and instead he'd gotten a calm woman folding her hands. And some animal part of him, the part that had spent 8 years needing me small to feel big, registered that something was wrong, that the woman across the table wasn't behaving like someone who was losing. He couldn't have known why, but that was the first crack, and I held on to it, that one flicker of doubt on his face, for the next 2 weeks, every time the fear got too loud. Which brings us back to the courtroom. To David walking Brooke down the aisle like a prize. To him leaning down to tell me I was nothing. To me smiling at a man who thought he'd already won. The hearing started, and for the first hour, David's plan worked beautifully. His attorney painted the picture they'd built. The stable, successful husband. The unstable, dependent wife. The poor man who'd tried so hard but simply had to think of his daughter's well-being. David sat there in his good suit, with his pregnant girlfriend in the gallery behind him, the very image of a man moving bravely onto a better life. I watched the judge's face, Judge Marian Ellis, 50-some years on the bench in her eyes, giving away absolutely nothing. Then it was Diane's turn. She stood up slowly. She didn't raise her voice, not once, the entire time. And she said, "Your Honor, before we discuss custody, I'd like to address the financial disclosures. Specifically, Mr. Bennett's sworn statement that his total assets amount to the accounts listed in Exhibit B." She laid down the first set of documents. "We'd like to introduce the complete records of an LLC called Bennett Consulting, an entity that does not appear anywhere on Mr. Bennett's sworn disclosure, an entity holding, as of last month, $386,000. I watched the color leave David's face for the first time. It got worse for him. Slowly, quietly, page by page, exactly the way my grandmother promised. Diane walked the court through 3 years of hidden transfers. She showed the exact months David had told me we couldn't afford our daughter's school, matched against the exact deposits into the account he'd hidden. She showed the court a man who had lied, under oath, in a signed document, to a judge. David's attorney objected, and slowly stopped objecting, because there's nothing to object to when the documents are simply true. Judge Ellis's expression had changed. It wasn't neutral anymore. When she looked at David now, it was with the specific, cold disappointment of a person who has spent decades watching people lie to her face and has run entirely out of patience for it. "Mr. Bennett," she said, "you submitted a sworn financial disclosure to this court." "Your Honor, I can explain." "I'm sure you can," she said. "Sit down." Behind him, in the gallery, I saw Brooke shift in her seat. The soft, smug confidence she'd walked in with was gone. She was looking at David's back now with the first flicker of a question in her eyes. The question of a woman who has just watched the man she left her life for revealed as a liar, and has begun, 1 second too late, to wonder what else he's lied about. She was about to find out. Diane let the silence sit, then she picked up the plain manila envelope. "Your Honor, there's one final piece of evidence obtained through the subpoena of that same account. It's a paid invoice, and its accompanying result, from a licensed prenatal genetics laboratory. The test was ordered and paid for by Mr. Bennett 4 months ago, without, we believe, the knowledge of the other party involved." I watched David. I watched the exact moment he understood what was in that envelope. I watched a man who had walked into that room certain he held every card, realize, all at once, that he'd been carrying the one that would end him, and that he'd carried it in himself, on his own arm, down the center aisle, for everyone to see. "Objection," his attorney said weakly. "Overruled," said Judge Ellis. "Approach and hand it up." Diane walked the envelope to the bench. Judge Ellis opened it herself. She read it once, silently. Something moved across her face. Then she looked up, first at David, then, briefly, with something almost like pity, at the pregnant young woman in pale blue in the second row. "For the record," Judge Ellis said, "this is a prenatal paternity test, ordered by the respondent, David Bennett, dated 4 months ago." She paused. "The results exclude Mr. Bennett as the biological father." The sound Brooke made, "I'll remember it the rest of my life." It wasn't loud. It was just a small, broken intake of breath, the sound of a person's entire future rearranging itself in 1 second. Because she hadn't known. He'd tested her baby behind her back, gotten an answer he didn't like, and kept dating her anyway. Kept parading her belly as his son, kept using her as a prop to win a custody case, while sitting on the knowledge that the child wasn't his and never telling her. That's who David was. That's who he'd always been. He just, for once, hadn't been able to keep it quiet. It ended fast after that, the way these things do once the ground gives way. The hidden money meant David's financial credibility was gone. A man who lies under oath about $400,000 is not a man a judge trusts about anything. The custody argument, his entire stable father, unstable mother story, collapsed because the stability was a lie stacked on a lie. Judge Ellis granted me primary custody of Emma. She granted me the house. She ordered a full forensic accounting of the hidden assets and referred the perjury to the appropriate authorities, which is a sentence that changes a man's life in ways a divorce never could. David walked out of that courtroom with far less than nothing. He walked out owing. And Brooke, I watched her stand up, one hand on her belly, and walk out through a different door than David. She didn't look at him. She didn't wait for him. Whatever they'd been, it had ended the second that envelope was opened. I passed her in the hallway afterward. And here's the thing I didn't expect about myself. I didn't gloat. I looked at this young woman who'd been part of the worst year of my life, and I saw someone David had lied to just as thoroughly as he'd lied to me. Someone about to raise a child alone, having just learned in a public courtroom that the man beside her had known, and hidden it, and used her anyway. I didn't say anything cruel. I just said, quietly, "He does that. It's not you. It was never you." And I kept walking, because my daughter was waiting for me at my sister's house. My sister, who I was allowed to see again now, and I had a life to go start. People ask me if I wish I'd done it differently, if I wish I'd screamed at him that first night with the phone in my hand, if I wish I'd confronted him, thrown the drink, made the scene, let him feel it. And I understand the impulse. Believe me, I do. There is a version of me that wanted nothing more than to burn it all down loud and let him watch. But my grandmother was right, the way she was right about most things. Loud is for people who are losing. Loud gives a man like David exactly what he wants, a chance to point at your anger and say, see how unstable she is. Loud would have cost me my daughter. Quiet cost him everything. So no, I don't wish I'd done it differently. I spent 1 year being patient, keeping my voice down, fighting with paper, while a man who'd told me 100 times that I was nothing walked around so certain of his victory that he handed me piece by piece everything I needed to take it away from him. He told me I'd walk out of that courtroom with nothing. I walked out with my house, my daughter, my name back, and my whole life ahead of me. He was half right, though. Somebody walked out of that courtroom with nothing. It just wasn't me. End of episode 2.